time to talk sports. It's Hacksaw's Headlines, a panorama of the world of sports, stories, comments, and opinions. Now, here's iconic sports talk show host Lee Hacksaw Hamilton and co-host John Riley.
Who wants to talk football? Who wants to talk NFL draft? We do. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lee Hacksaw Hamilton, along with my co-host John Riley from our studios in San Diego. We welcome you to a bonus podcast Friday, all things NFL draft. John, what an unbelievable 4 hours of action. First day, first round NFL draft. That's why we're doing our bonus podcast here on a Friday, heading to the great sports weekend. Here comes rounds 2 and 3 on Friday night, the rest of the draft on Saturday. So much information.
So much. And it was a great event in Kansas City. We're going to go into the next couple of rounds. And I know that starts in about an hour. We got to get you out of here in front of the television.
Okay, let's talk about storylines because we're going to cover this draft from a couple of different angles. A lot of opinions here. Before we start, I know we have football fans that join us on a live stream. John, tell them how they can join us to talk NFL football only today on our fans forum.
All right, you have some questions, some comments about the NFL draft. Drop them in the live chat on Facebook or YouTube. We'll get you involved in Hacksaw's in the fans forum at the conclusion of Hacksaw's Headlines.
And we remind you to subscribe to everything we're doing on our podcast. We invite you to share with all your friends. Tell them what we're doing. Check my website, LeeHacksawHamilton.com. At this hour, I have a recap of the first round. It's all written for you. And by the way, feel free to give us a rating. I will take a 5-star rating from you. John will gladly accept a 3 or 4-star rating. John, question 1. Let's get this thing started.
All right, we got to start off with Roger Goodell, man. I mean, this is his big event.
It really is. Somebody asked me this morning on one of the Canadian shows that I do NFL reports for, if I could pick up a word or two to describe what happened last night in the first round. And the words they came up with were surprised and stunned. I was surprised at all the transactions. I was surprised at what Houston executed. I was surprised at the run on quarterbacks at the start, and then all the quarterbacks disappeared off the board. And I was surprised 16 defensive players went in the first round. And I had told you yesterday on our Thursday podcast, I thought that's the way the dominoes were going to fall. But I was really stunned. 9 teams, middle of the first round of the back, reached. They went and got guys that most people had projected would be at the end of the first round or into the second day of the draft. And those guys became first-round draft picks. So there was just a myriad of things that happened. And you said, holy cow, why and how did that happen? It was really surprising. 6 trades in all in the first day of the draft. And you normally don't see that. And then obviously what happened with the quarterbacks dropping back, falling off the board, sitting in the green room. On we go.
On we go. So let's start with what the Chargers, what do you think how they did on the day one?
Well, you and I had gone back and forth. I projected they were going to get a bonanza. I thought they were going to get a really good player. I did not expect this player to be there because he, in some of the mock drafts from the insiders around the country, thought that Quentin Johnston of TCU was going to be maybe somewhere between 15 and 20. But as strange stuff happened above the Chargers in the draft where people started taking weird selections, quality players started to fall in their direction. So when their choice came up, Dalton Kincaid, the Utah tight end, was still there. Any one of the receivers was still there. Some of the defensive tackles were still there. They went for a stud. Now, I'll preface what I'm going to say about the TCU rookie, Quentin Johnston, with this. Be prepared to say goodbye to one of the veteran wide receivers. I think he comes in as the heir apparent to Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. We have talked in the past, John, that their cap figures next year are $30 million apiece. Somebody is going to disappear. Maybe somebody's going to disappear this year at the trade deadline. Somebody will be let go at the end of the season because the Chargers just can't have those type of cap figure wide receivers. Johnston's big. He's 6'4". He's 210. Kid caught 115 passes at TCU. Unbelievable physical specimen. He's almost like a clone of Mike Williams. Very good yards after the catch. has had problems with drops. They're going to have to work with the mechanics of catching passes with him. But 19 yards per reception, 115 catches for the Frogs, 14 touchdowns in 2 seasons. And the kid is big. The kid is physical. The kid is a gamer. The kid comes from good bloodlines, both of his family in the military. He evidently blew the Chargers away at the combine when they had the individual meetings. Very impressive player. So Quentin Johnston comes in. You got Keenan Allen. You got Mike Williams. You got the fast emerging Josh Palmer, who caught a bunch of passes last year. You're going to have Jalen Gayton back off the knee surgery. And now you add Quentin Johnston. That's the big play receiver. I'll ask you, should they have taken Big White out, or should they have taken Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, or Mike Mayers, the other tight end, one Utah, one Notre Dame? Who should they have taken?
Well, I was doing some research on Kincaid when you kept bringing him up, and that guy is legit.
Yes.
I mean, he's a great player, and he's huge too. But all along, when we were talking about the wide receivers, you thought they were going to get a burner, right? You wanted someone that was going to be fast. And all along, you thought the wide receiver at USC was really going to be the top guy. This pick surprised me to a degree, but I'll tell you what, as a Charger fan, we got to be careful. We don't say Quentin Jammer. It's Quentin Johnston.
Big play receiver. This will be fun. They get a new toy to give to Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator. Put this in your toolbox. Mm-hmm. Chargers got so many skilled people. So I'm pleased they got themselves a really good player. That being said, they still have problems at defensive tackle, and they have holes in the secondary. Mm-hmm. So they've not solved all their issues yet, but that's why there's a second and third round on Friday. Next question.
Okay, let's go on. I mean, the Texans were just electric last night. I mean, what's your breakdown here, Lee?
Well, if you recall yesterday, you almost spilled your coffee on the table, when I told you that I thought the whole draft turned, the key to the draft was what those guys did with the second pick, what the Houston Texans did. And it happened. They stunned everybody by taking C.J. Stroud, the Ohio State quarterback. And you and I had barked in weeks gone by on our podcast when we turned the NFL page. I said, you got to have a quarterback in the NFL. It's a quarterback's league. Please don't tell me Houston going to try to play again with a quarterback, Davis Mills, whose career record's 5-22-1. Well, they hid this thing pretty good behind the smokescreen. And everybody was writing it. They must have been dropping hints in Houston about defense. And they took C.J. Stroud. And the minute that happened, I said, whoa, that's going to change the top of the draft board. And then 5 minutes later, they made the trade with Arizona to get the third pick after taking the quarterback at number 2. And they paid an unbelievable price to execute this transaction. They gave Arizona a 1 and a 2 this year, a 1 and a 3 next year.
Wow.
Now, Houston has stockpiled a lot of currency, and they just spent a whole bunch of it, but they went and got Will Anderson, the linebacker from Alabama. And there's a hidden piece of this conversation. Nobody's really brought it out. So D'Amico Ryans comes in, working with Nick Caserio, the general manager, and Houston started the draft with 12 picks. They get the quarterback, they get the pass rusher, and nobody's talked about this other piece of the story. They signed 12 veteran free agents on defense.
Wow.
12. They've rebuilt the whole bloody defense. They'll be renting guys for a year or two, but they're going to go from bottom of the barrel, and suddenly they're going to be really competitive because it's just not Will Anderson, the linebacker, but it's a whole cadre of guys that they brought in from other players, from the 49ers. And it's just amazing how they've flipped this thing real quick. And now they got a legitimate quarterback. He's going to play. I don't know how good he's going to be as a raw rookie, but he's going to play. So suddenly everything has changed. The whole draft flipped because of what the Houston Texans did. Your reaction?
I mean, have the Texans ever had a great team? I don't think they ever have. I think last time football was big in Houston was when the Oilers were playing.
No. Deshaun Watson?
Yeah.
J.J. Watt?
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins?
But how far did they get in the playoffs?
They had a whole good group of players, and they were really competitive, and then injuries kind of overwhelmed them.
Right.
Virtually everybody. At one point, they had 3 of the top defensive players in the league. Whitney Merciless gave him 10 years of really great play at linebacker, and J.J. Watt was there. But then injuries caught up to all those guys, and then the whole Deshaun Watson mess. So, I mean, they've gone through 2 really horrid horrid season. So no, I mean, Houston Oilers football is a long time ago, and I know you're going to tell me Pastorini and Earl Campbell and way back in the day, George Blanda with the AFL Oilers, but they were good, and then it got really, really bad. Now they've gone through the really painful time. So it stunned me. But as I said all week, they hold the key to what's going to happen. And boy, they turned this thing on, opened the door, and they dove through the door and flipped the draft upside down.
Yeah, I mean, they're ready to win. They get the coach. They move the draft picks around. I mean, they're all in Texas.
We move on. Next question.
Okay, we're going to talk about the Colts. And this particular pick was interesting to me because this is the guy that's from another world. He's from another planet, and the Colts took a risk on this one.
Well, I don't know if they took a risk. They're taking what I would assume, John, is a big investment.
Okay.
AR-15, Anthony Richardson. If you look at some of the video of him at Florida, you say, wow, what a stud, what an athlete. He's a freak. He's 6'4", 240, runs with the wind, strong arm, sometimes accurate, sometimes not so accurate. I think he's really an uncut gem. But Houston, I can't imagine the shock within their front office when C.J. Stroud came off the board at number 2 after Carolina took Bryce Young at number 1, because all of a sudden, whoa, they have to step back and they have to reevaluate. I wonder if there was big debate. Should it be Anthony Richardson, great skill to be delivered at a later date, or do we take a jump in faith and try to do Will Levis from Kentucky?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's all kinds of stories about Levis, and we'll get to that in just a minute. This kid's a player. But that being said, he's an unpolished gem. He's unrefined. He's going to have to play. He's going to have to play with a running back who they don't know if Jonathan Taylor is going to be back fully from surgery. He's going to have to play behind a battered offensive line, guys coming off surgery. The left tackle had retired. Play with a bunch of young wide receivers. All of them got dinged last year. So he walks in, and yeah, they got a lot of names there you might recognize. But boy, there's a lot of glitches and issues with a whole ton of these players. So how do they handle this with Shane Steichen, the new head coach? But A.R. Richardson is just like Jalen Hurts. Big, fast, physical, can run, can drill it. But he only completed 53% of his passes while at Florida last year, and he only played 1 year as a starter. Work in progress. You send him out there with a bad team, he might get his brains blown out. What happens to his confidence if he's throwing interceptions and taking sacks because he's not ready to read defenses, etc.? Huge talent down road, but how hard is it going to be from point A in Indianapolis right now to point B where he makes them a really decent football team? Big debate, but I think Indy was shocked. And they obviously saw more upside to Anthony Richardson than they saw to Will Levis. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I saw one of the highlights of him throwing like a 50, 60-yard pass. It looked like a flick of the wrist. I mean, this kid is very talented, to your point. But how about the video shot of the Indianapolis Colts war room, draft room, and there's Jim Irsay right in the very front of it. It looked like they had to roll him in, because he was barely moving. But it's just so this whole draft is just a spectacle of entertainment on so many different levels. But this is going to be a fun quarterback to watch.
Well, I think so. And I think down road,
Mm-hmm.
but they've had such a struggle since Andrew Luck walked away from them. But I think it's a good pick, but the talent is to be delivered, I think, in the future. Okay, let's go on and talk about a quarterback that did not get picked.
Oh my God, the whole Will Levis saga. I mean, this is unbelievable. And just the emotions in the green room with him and his family and his girlfriend.
He was the last one in the green room. He was, there were 3 marquee guys that didn't get picked in the first round. They're going to get picked within the hour at the top of the second round. And by the way, look for a pile of trades, because I think everybody is calling Pittsburgh, which has the 32nd pick, the top pick in the second round, to try to get that pick, because that quarterback's going to get taken. Was it toe injury? Was it the fact that he really struggled his second year compared to the statistics he had put up prior? There was some glitch there. Part of me said, well, as the draft went on, the teams that were drafting didn't need quarterbacks. But then I went back and I looked, and I said, sure they did. Minnesota could have taken Will Levis as the future in place of the highly priced Kirk Cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Would have given him a year or two to develop Levis. So Tennessee, desperately tried to trade picks and picks or players and picks to get into the first round to get him. Didn't. They took an offensive lineman with their own choice. There are 3 or 4 teams that I looked at that said, well, they could have taken him, did not take him, but they also had a lot of other needs. And when there started to be a run on defensive players and there was a run on the offensive linemen, I think that's why Levis just fell down the board, because others said, well, yeah, we might like that quarterback for the future, but Jesus, is highly rated left tackle here, or pretty good pass rusher here. I think that's what happened. He's going to go. He'll probably go first pick, second round. Somebody's going to trade in and give Pittsburgh a chunk of additional currency, and the Steelers will let somebody have that draft pick.
I mean, some people thought he was a top 10 or maybe even an outside shot at the number 1 overall.
Well, that might have been a reach.
Yeah, but it's just kind of interesting that he fell out of the whole top 10 list. But it's just the camera out that is on his face, and the drama and the disappointment, and and you could see his girlfriend was really kind of angry through the whole thing, because she thought her boyfriend was going to be this famous guy, and he is famous, but now for a different reason. And then mom's there kind of consoling him. So it's just the drama of the whole thing is amazing.
I flash back to the movie Draft Day.
Yeah.
Bo Callahan sitting in the green room forever, and steam is coming out of his ears, and the body language and all that. And I thought, well, poor Will Levis. And that's one of the downsides to being in the green room. He was not the only one. I think the other surprise, Joey Porter, the son of the Pittsburgh Steeler legend, who had a great career at Boston College, I thought was a mid-first round pick. I thought he was going anywhere from 15 to 31, and he did not. He sat there and sat there and sat there. I don't understand that glitch unless they think he's undersized, or maybe there's a lack of foot speed, because he'd been projected to be a first-round draft pick. Brian Branch out of Alabama, safety, good player. He did not get picked. These guys are all going to go at the top of the second round. So I felt bad for Will Levis. He'll get his day, and there's nothing wrong with going in and being a second round draft pick. If you're sitting there till the 5th round, now there's something else going on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just remember Aaron Rodgers about 20 years ago sitting there in the green room looking kind of lonely. So, yeah, let's hope Will Levis gets picked this early today.
On we go. Let's talk about the huge, massive defensive lineman on the draft board.
Yeah, this guy is something, and a very talented player. I mean, unbelievable. But I was reading more about what got him into trouble a few months back, and so I want to hear your breakdown.
Well, Jalen Carter, just a stud of a defensive tackle, University of Georgia, sat on the board. Many people thought top 5 pick. I thought he was a lock to go to the Seahawks. Sat there till 9. Philadelphia made the deal to get him. What a good player he is. That being said, there are character flaws with this kid. The big issue at the end of the season, after the national championship game, he went out partying with friends and teammates. He got involved in a drag race outside of Athens, Georgia. The driver of the other car was a teammate who flipped and crashed and got killed. Woman in the car got really badly hurt, worked within the athletic department. Then they find out that Carter was driving a university vehicle he should not have had access to. Then he was not forthcoming with the police during the course of the investigation. Were you there? Where were you when this happened? Where did you go? The answers were not really forthcoming. They had to squeeze it out of him finally. He never got charged with anything as it relates to the fatality of the accident. Now, there was a minor traffic charge for speeding and drag racing, which I believe they've already settled out of court with some type of plea bargain. But his lack of forthrightness with the police, I think, really bothered NFL people. Then we found out this morning that Georgia coaches didn't like his attitude, didn't like his, quote, practice habits. Football came easy to him because he's a massive man. He's big as a cement block. He's a really good football player, but the coaches did not like his approach to practice and things like that. And the insinuations are some of the coaches told NFL teams, yeah, he's massive, 6'4", 316, whatever he is. But this really bothered us. So suddenly clubs are looking at, yeah, he's got all these measurables, but what about the intangibles? And they started to back away. A couple of clubs in the top 10 picks took him off the draft board. Said, we're not just going there with the guy. So I think Philadelphia got a steal. And the reason I think the Eagles get a steal with Carter is because they drafted two of his teammates a year ago, led by the other big defense tackle, Jordan. Keep him on, and there'll be obviously direction from that coaching staff as to how he's going to operate and be a professional football player. So a little bit of history here, and that's why he did not go top 5, but nothing wrong going top 9. And my goodness, he's going to a great defense. Holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, the defensive line in Philadelphia is going to be incredible. So that's a great place for him to go. But I mean, we were talking yesterday about some of these players that get in trouble with the law. It's really disappointing. In the whole scheme of things, granted, it was an unfortunate loss of life, but it wasn't his fault necessarily. This is, in my opinion, relatively speaking, minor compared to other things like P. Williams we were talking about yesterday. But I think these players have been prima donnas. They've been, in high school, they were untouchable. In college, they're untouchable. They think they can do no wrong. And then they have to grow up in a hurry.
And they're entitled. And it's a big issue. But I'll take issue with what you just said when I open the door. If you want to go stand out in left field and do the rest of the show, if he's not driving the other car, there is no drag race.
Okay, fair enough.
And simultaneously, when the police come to ask you a question, do you not answer it honestly at that point, at that moment? So there's a whole pile of issues there. Okay, let's move on and let's do a little ranking here. Go ahead.
Okay, so you're asking who had the best draft. I mean, frankly, I was shocked that the Eagles were in the top 10 for their picks. I mean, it was obviously from previous trades.
Sure. I gave Philadelphia and Seattle top 2 votes because they had 2 first-round picks each. For Philadelphia to get Carter, and then at the back end of the first round, by virtue of an injury issue, for them to go get Nolan Smith, unbelievably fast linebacker from Georgia. I mean, those are 2 bonanza players. The Eagles have already added to just an unbelievable defense led by Fletcher Cox and the linebackers in the secondary. Seattle, I think, had a really good draft, but I think the Seahawks also had a really strange draft. Seattle wound up with a really good cover corner from Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. I mean, that guy is a player. You look at him and you see Richard Sherman. So I thought that was a really good draft pick. And then later on, they could have had a quarterback as a future replacement, and they did not go get it. And instead, they went and got Jackson and Jiba, speed guy, Ohio State. So now you got Lockett and the other stud receiver on the other side, DK Metcalf. And now you got a slot guy.
Wow.
So, Geno Smith said, yes, sir. So I think Philadelphia, Seattle had the best drafts of all. Of course, they had multiple picks too.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see Seattle kind of coming back to life. And they were saying that the kid that they drafted from Ohio State might have been the best receiver they've had over the last 3 or 4 years, including local guy Chris Olave. Yeah,
and you add in, I mean, you look at all the receivers Ohio State has produced in the last 3 seasons. And this guy's good. He was dinged up. There's some injury problems there, but fascinating. Next question.
Okay. So we were talking about the Lions. They're on the come. The Lions are the hot, fun team in the NFC. I mean, what was your take on their draft day?
Well, the question was strange drafts.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just alluded to Seattle. They could have had Jalen Carter as a cement block in the middle as they try to fix their defense, and their defense is really poor. Could have had him, and they could have had the quarterback of the future. Maybe it was Will Levis. Maybe it was Herndon. And they had told Geno Smith, we are probably going to get a quarterback for the future. So instead of taking the huge defensive tackle and the quarterback of the future, they took 2 good football players. I just thought, I don't know, Pete changed his mind, or maybe the Carter off-field issues chased the Seahawks off the board there. I don't understand Detroit, and I like Dan Campbell, and he's done such a phenomenal job in 2+ years of stockpiling talent and getting into play hard, and they rented the quarterback Jared Goff. When you're drafting there at 6 and 18, and then they traded back a little bit, why would your top pick, would you take a running back at Detroit when you had just spent a second-round pick on a big kid out of Georgia, DeAndre Swift,
Mhm.
and you just spent free agent money to get David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. Why would you take a running back with that draft pick? I thought that was really weird. And then with their other pick, they went and got a player that you could have drafted at the back of the first round or in the second round because he was not projected that high. So I'm sitting there and just wondering, why is Detroit conducting this type of business this way? I just don't understand. And they got such holes in their secondary. Why would you have had a lot of injury problems and a number one pick that failed and another guy they traded? Why wouldn't just go get a really good cover corner? So I thought their draft picks were reaches and really strange. And in fact, the Alabama running back who got drafted with their first pick said, I didn't even think they were interested. We didn't have much conversation. It's a weird way to do business, especially when you've already spent inventory on DeAndre Swift and on David Montgomery.
Well, for both of these head coaches, are they also the general manager?
No, but they have a lot of clout, a lot of impact.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I just look at Seattle. I look at Geno Smith, and I'm like, it was a few years ago, we thought he was done. He was like washed up with the Jets, and he's kind of had a nice little comeback in Seattle.
Yeah, and they've been in the mix of rebuilding. They've had no running game. He's had to do a lot of it on his own. They've rebuilt their offensive line. So I have a lot of confidence in John Schneider and Pete Carroll. But I thought those were kind of really strange drafts.
Okay, so we got the big news that you broke yesterday about Lamar Jackson.
Well, as we've gone forward, we've talked extensively about the Baltimore Ravens quarterback, his demand financially, what he eventually settled on. He's top of what everybody else got. Deshaun Watson set the new high water mark a year and a half ago, coming out of all the controversy in Houston when he got the 5-year, $230 million fully guaranteed contract from the Browns, which opened everybody's eyebrows, and suddenly there was a revolt. When the Deshaun Watson contract is not going to be the new norm in the NFL. We're not guarantee a quarterback all 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is. Then along comes Jalen Hurts. And where Deshaun Watson got $230 fully guaranteed, Jalen Hurts got $250, 3/4 of it guaranteed.
Wow.
Became the highest average quarterback at $51 million. Watson had been at $50. Now they got Lamar Jackson. So he goes out, he gets his total contract is $260, $52 million guaranteed. So he's now the top earner.
Mm-hmm.
Total salary, average salary. He got $179 million guaranteed. Some of that includes an insurance injury clause. So he made out like a bandit. So the next domino to fall is going to be in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. Is he going to get $53 million from Mike Brown? And with the Chargers, Justin Herbert, can he extract $53 million from the Spanos family? One contract, John, impacts the next contract, especially at the most important part of an NFL team, your quarterback. And, the intangible story there with Lamar Jackson is so he gets his money, he stays where he's really comfortable, and add into this, they went out and they got Odell Beckham and from the New York Giants and the LA Rams as a wide receiver. And add into this, they drafted a wide receiver yesterday on Thursday. So they're putting things around him, and they have 3 deep running backs, and they have a great tight end in Mark Andrews. So suddenly Baltimore looks a lot healthier on the offensive side of the football, where they've really been deficient the last couple of years. That being said, Lamar Jackson has to stay healthy. So I painted you the storyline of how these contracts have topped each other going forward. What do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously it has a lot to do with timing when contracts come up. But do you think Lamar Jackson is the best quarterback in the NFL? I mean, he's going to be the highest paid quarterback. I mean, if you were to disregard the timing of contracts, who's the number one dog?
Well, again, they rebuilt the offense around him to fit his skill coming out of the University of Louisville. So you got to give the Ravens credit for flexibility because they had to make a lot of radical changes. And they have. The ingredient, he's got to stay healthy. Last 2 years, he's been off the field a lot with a wide variety of injuries. But that being said, I think his career record might be 43-15.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Exactly. For as screwball an offense as they run, for as different a quarterback as he is, because he's more scramble than he's pocket. and he's more run first, maybe throw second. He's a little bit like Randall Cunningham, not like Donovan McNabb, but he's a bigger version of Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. But I think he's really good, and his proficiency throwing the football, his accuracy, his decision-making has gotten collectively better and better. And now for the first time really in a group of years, they've added, because it used to be just him and the tight end Mark Andrews and run the football. Now you go out and you go get Beckham, and you go out and you go get one of these wide receivers as they did at the end of the first round, suddenly their offense really, really looks different. He's got to stay healthy, though.
Well, the wide receiver they got was the kid from Boston College, right?
Yes, Zay Flowers.
But they were comparing him to Tyreek Hill, and I think that's a pretty reasonable comparison. So imagine having that kind of a burner to throw to. Apparently, Lamar was pretty happy with that pick.
He should be happy with the money, too, on top of it. Yeah. So, but now we know, now the next topic on the table for future podcasts will be Joe Burrow's price tag, Justin Herbert's price tag.
Yeah.
And will these owners who historically have been either poor or cheap, like Brown Spanos, have the bank to go ahead and do it, to give it to their quarterbacks? Because you got to give it to them. You can't let these guys go on the open market. And if somebody's making 52, you can't franchise tag Joe Burrow in Cincinnati and say, well, the collective bargaining agreement says we can. That's not going to fly. Can't do that with the Chargers either. So, hey, before we get to Fans Forum, tell people about subscribing. Tell people about the Fans Forum and how it works, and then give them the invitation to give us thumbs up and 5 stars.
Okay. Yeah. So all kinds of ways you can get involved in supporting the podcast. And yeah, if you go on Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review, 5 stars, if you think Lee deserves it, that's actually really helpful. It kind of boosts the credibility of the podcast, and, it helps us attract viewers and listeners. And so does the thumbs up as well. That's good for the algorithm that kind of gets the views and gets more exposure to the podcast. You can get involved in the Fans Forum. We got a couple of guys involved right now. There's still a chance. Just drop your question or comment in the live chat on Facebook or YouTube.
And if you like our live streams, give us a thumbs up. Also, give us the 5-star rating. And don't forget to check my website. It's written, ton of information. I wrote a recap of the first round of the draft. Go to my website, LeeHacksawHamilton.com. You can check it every day, check it at night. First thing in the morning, you'll find really different information there, not just on the NFL, but all things as it relates to baseball, the NBA, the NHL, Pro Golf Tour, auto racing. You talk about it, I'll write about it, and express an opinion about it. John, throw us some questions here.
All right, here's one from Force Ghost Fabio. He says, hey, Cleveland and Houston expansions have proved you need to build the lines first before you grab a young quarterback.
Well, when you go through, understand the part of the expansion process is you're paying a volume of money, but you're going to get the first pick in the draft. And if you're brand new, you need to take the top quarterback that's available, because it is a quarterback league. The problem you have, and Cleveland becomes a prime example, when they came back in 1999, when they put the expansion team in to replace the old Cleveland Browns who had gone to Baltimore, they drafted Tim Couch, who came out of Kentucky that year and was the best quarterback in the country. Now, he ran in a 5-wide receiver set. It was kind of a gimmick and gadget offense, but he went to Cleveland. But the problem is, historically, if you go to a bad club, you might be a bright quarterback, but you might get your brains beat out. I mean, that starts with what happened to Tim Couch. Do you know Cleveland went through, this is before Deshaun Watson finally got there in the Houston trade, Cleveland went through 23 different starting quarterbacks dating back to 1999 when Tim Couch was there. And Couch's career got shortened by the batterings he took. In Houston, their top quarterback was a kid out of Fresno State, David Carr. He went in there and he got killed. And he retired early. Just he took so many sacks and he was so banged up. I think one year, I want to say he got sacked 86 times. You know how deplorable that is?
Yeah.
And that's a problem. Young quarterback, top of the draft board, you're going to a bad team. And there's a reason they're a bad team. They can't protect their quarterback and they don't have the people in front of them. If you can keep him healthy, you can grow him, and hopefully he will evolve. You know, the most tragic figure of modern day quarterbacks was Jim Plunkett. If you recall back in the day, Jim Plunkett was drafted by New England, went to a horrid Patriots team, and had a great career at Stanford. And he was a stud. I mean, he was big and physical and strong and intellectual and all that. And he just got busted up. He took so many sacks. His career was really never what it potentially could have been. He wound up at the end of his career with the Raiders, but he walked into a situation there where he was managing the games because he had so many great skill guys that Al Davis had built around him. So, the Jim Plunkett example is what happens with a large percentage of the guys that go at the top of the draft board. I mean, that it doesn't happen every time, as witnessed by the greatness of John Elway, and obviously Peyton Manning, and to a degree, Phillip Rivers. But you go high in the draft, odds are you're going to a really bad team.
Yeah, probably with a bad organization, a bad GM, a bad coach. So they're set up to fail in those cases. But talking about the Browns, I've seen online where people have made these custom Browns jerseys with a number and then the list of all the NFL quarterbacks they had. And it's incredible to go through that list because you've got guys that were drafted high. You've got journeymen. You've got some pretty decent guys in that list, and every one of them failed through that whole Cleveland streak.
Yeah. They got Deshaun Watson because Deshaun Watson was available because of all the mess he got himself involved in off the field. But, prior to that, the guy that was going to lead him back, Baker Mayfield, how'd that work out? So it's tough. It's tough to develop quarterbacks. On we go. Next question.
Okay, let's take a look at some of our YouTube comments. And we're getting comments from a lot of different social media platforms. This is from Facebook, from Brett Shepard. And talking about, the Rams like losing all the players and not really having a draft pick. He says, love Hacksaw, but is he so wrong about the Rams?
I'm not writing that text to us from left field. The Rams have lost 17 players in the offseason. 13 of them were starters. That includes 2 kickers, 11 other guys. No cap space. Eating contracts to get rid of players. The Allen Robinson wide receiver trade from the Rams to the Steelers this past week, prime example. Granted, they've stockpiled all these draft choices. I think they enter the draft with 11 picks, but that's 11 unproven players. I feel sorry for Matthew Stafford. Offensive line problems from last year are still the offensive line problems from this year. Now they're down another receiver because they got rid of Robinson, who they paid $45 million to, and they're paying some of his contract to go for the Steelers. Can Cam Akers be the player that they hoped he would be? Well, he did have a good bounce-back breakout season last year. Is there enough help defensively? Where's the pass rush going to come from? Who's going to help in the secondary? They've lost so many players to the back end, including the trade of Jalen Ramsey, the release of Leonard Floyd. Aaron Donald's going to walk into the huddle and hand out name tags. Hi, my name's Aaron Donald. What's you? Where'd you come from? I just, at the end of the day, the Rams spent all these assets, Brett, to win the Super Bowl. Nothing wrong with that. But they dug themselves such a monster hole in terms of the salary cap, and all these bills are coming due. Now they're in massive rebuild. I don't even think they're a 500 football team going forward. So, I hope it doesn't rain on you out in left field, but I think I'm right, and I think you're just writing me with your heart rather than using your head.
Well, the NFC West, all those teams are improved. The Niners, the Cardinals, the Seahawks.
Well, the Cardinals, they're in disarray.
Well, yeah, but they were at the top of the draft board or near there, so they got some more players there on the up. So, you say the Rams may not even be 500. Yeah, it's possible they may finish with only 4 wins. Who knows?
Well, they only had 5 last year, and Sean McVay just melted down to the point he thought about walking away and going to work at a library. I'll be intrigued to see how he handles the negativity, because they're going to have to rebuild this, and he's going to need some patience, and he's had great success. But when you're going through bad times, you got to search deep down within to stay focused and to stay positive and to grow the next group of players. But the next group of players not going to win him the NFC West, at least not this first year. And Matthew Stafford's got a lot of mileage on those tires now, and he got pounded last year at 2 different injuries, and they don't have a backup quarterback. It's odd. I should have mentioned this. They might be in the running within the hour to trade up. And I'd never rule this out because they're bold about everything they do. They might trade up to get the Pittsburgh pick, and they might be the one that takes Will Levis.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's see what happens.
So, Brett, please feel free to write us from left field again. Thank you.
Okay, got another comment here. This is from David Najera about the the Aaron Rodgers trade to the Jets. He says he's going to regret it.
You're talking about Rodgers regretting it, or Green Bay regretting it, or the Jets regretting it?
Well, that's a great question. I think he means Aaron Rodgers.
Nah, I don't think so, because they've loaded that thing with offensive skill people. He was a huge backer of Nathaniel Hackett when Hackett was the coordinator in Green Bay, became the failed coach in Denver, got fired in less than 1 year. Guess where his luggage is now? Hempstead, Long Island. He's the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets. So there is a linkage between Aaron Rodgers and Nate Hackett. They got Bryce Hall, a bright young running back. The intangible thing is they had 3 offensive tackles, all had major injuries. Got to get them all back. I'm a big believer in Robert Saleh's defense. I think that's going to take a jump up, and that's going to improve. So I don't think it's a lose-lose situation for Aaron Rodgers. I do think when you have a chance to have a unique legacy, and he's had a great career, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, why wouldn't you just finish it with a franchise that took you in and grew you and you starred for? Why would you force a trade this late in your career to go somewhere else, even though you like Hackett or you think there's a lot of good people there in New York? So that's the only disappointment. Is I think he should have started. He should have finished at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, that would have been nice, to kind of go out on top, go out as a Packer. But, this is like Brett Favre version 2.0. We got the Packer guy going to the Jets. Is it going to work out? I don't know. I remember LaDainian Tomlinson went to the Jets too.
Well, I think Rodgers has got much more gas left in the tank than Brett Favre did. Brett also kind of wandered into Minnesota. Who could have thought he'd ever put on purple after playing all those years wearing green and gold in the NFC North? Next question here on our fans forum.
All right, we got one here. This is from the Twitter, and you ran a poll about the Chargers. This is from Force Ghost Fabio. He says, haven't followed the Chargers since they moved, but I do miss Beathard trading the next year's #1 for a 3rd-round project he could have had in the 6th. Good times.
Well, unfortunately for Bobby Beathard, it really finished up badly. And I know, as he just passed away 6 months ago, I know that was the sandwich board he'd wear around his neck. I drafted Ryan Leaf. They bear some of the blame there. So does Mike Price, the coach at Washington State, for lying to everybody about Ryan Leaf. But he also, please understand this, he built a Super Bowl team here in San Diego, which had had no success dating all the way back to the Air Coryell era. I mean, when I came here, we were at the tail end. When I became the voice of the Chargers, we were at the tail end of the Air Coryell era, and the last one standing was Dan Fouts, and then he got hurt his last year and said, I'm retiring. And that set off all the detonations where they had to rebuild, and rebuilding takes forever. And if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. And they didn't have a quarterback, and it took them forever. And Beathard found and traded because he knew who Stan Humphries was. And Beathard went into free agency in that era, and he got all these offensive linemen from other places. And his intelligence said, this guy who was a defensive end is going to be a good left tackle. And this guy who was a left tackle, I can make into a really good guard. And then they drafted some other really good players. So as much as you may demean Beathard for the way it ended up, the Ryan Leaf 1-15 season, understand, he fixed this thing, and he took us where we had never, ever been before. So I think you need to view Bobby Beathard's stay here in a little bit more positive light, because he got the bolts to hire Bobby Ross, built them to go to the AFC Championship game and win in Pittsburgh, and they went to the Super Bowl. It's a run. It's a journey you never forget. So Beathard deserves accolades for that. And I think a lot of that gets lost in the shuffle of this whole Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf fiasco.
You remember the year that the Chargers started 0-4? I think they had Humphries, or it was right when they traded
Bobby Ross's first year, I believe.
And I think you were the one that said they're going to run the table the rest of the season, and they darn near did. I think they only lost 1 of the remaining 12 games. So, Beathard brought in a lot of talent. You got to give it up for him. He's a Hall of Famer.
And, it's really strange. And I thought about this morning. It's a short window to do what these guys do. And the Chargers had that run to the Super Bowl. And, we had the big welcome home party after the Pittsburgh Steelers AFC Championship
Oh,
victory.
that was huge.
It was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Memory of a lifetime. But the window to do this is really small. We'll talk about this sometime on another podcast. But every one of the offensive linemen who had played that entire run to the Super Bowl, every one of them had knee surgery from after the Super Bowl game through training camp to opening weekend the following season. Every one of those guys had gone through some type of scope knee surgery. And the offensive line was never the same again. And there was a lot of mileage in that offensive line. And, all of a sudden they woke up and they were hurt and they were old. You can't replace that many offensive linemen. And they just never were quite the same team again. So, you only get one kick at the can with this roster, this group, and that was one and done. But Beathard put it together.
Hey, weren't those just great times at Qualcomm?
Oh,
I mean, I had season tickets then through the 90s, and I was listening to you on the radio while I was watching the game, and that was just an electric time to be a Charger fan.
Oh my goodness! What was my phrase? Ticket in your left hand, transistor radio in your right hand.
Yeah.
Show me your lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Damn it! But we'll talk about. We'll do a stroll down memory lane one of these times. Another question or two here on the fans forum.
Yeah, we do actually. We'll go back to some of these comments that have come in, and here we go. George Lazo Jr. says best 15. This is just like the old days.
Damn right.
Yeah, and then there's another one here from Force Ghost, and I think this is a good point. He says it's a shame Penny didn't work out in Seattle. He just couldn't stay healthy.
Exactly. He had, I want to say, 3 major injuries, 5 injuries in all. Just could not stay on the field. When he was on the field for whatever window it was, he was productive. He averaged 5.8 yards per carry last year. Yeah, that was in cameo appearances over 5 or 6 games. But when he could play, holy cow, he made things happen. So just really tough for him. But there were fluke injuries. He broke his hand, had a torn calf. Might have been a knee injury in there. But he was hurt a large segment of the time to the point, and he was not the only one. Seahawks lost all their running backs.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, Seattle woke up and said, we can't be paying these guys what they're supposed to get as a 4th or 5th year veteran, because the union agreement says, John Riley, if you're a 5th year player, this is your base salary and your salary keeps going up. But John Riley, if you can't stay on the field, I just can't keep you. And that's what happened to Penny. One of the other running backs, Chris Carson, career-ending neck injury. Another one, Travis Homer, speed guy, not as big and physical as Penny, a knee injury. These guys are all gone to different places, and Carson's gone into retirement. That's the way the NFL is, unfortunately, for Rashad Penny. Injuries are part of the game.
Well, those guys just get pounded. I mean, so it's no wonder that they're devaluing the running backs. They just seem to cycle through them. And I remember when LT was getting near the age of 30, they used to say that's when the inflection in the curve happens and their production really tails off when they hit their 30s.
Yeah. And, he had one knee injury here right at the end. Unfortunately, it was the year the Chargers went to the AFC Championship game in New England, and he was hurt, and Rivers was hurt. He had knee scope surgery, but he was trying to play through it. It just wasn't the same player, same team. The saddest thing that I remember from that season, and there were so many great things that happened with LT and the records he set and all that, and players carrying him off the field after he set the record for touchdown scored. Saddest thing is I looked up, and here they are in cold Foxborough playing the night game, AFC Championship game, and he's sitting on the end of the bench with a cape around him, his helmet on, looking down, knee injury, can't play anymore. And it was the saddest picture.
It was very sad
of the Flash. But there's so many great times that Rivers and Gates and LT had. It was good, but they just never got there. And it's hard to believe they never got to the Super Bowl with the cadre of really great offensive players that they had put in place.
Yeah, no, it's a shame that they didn't capitalize on that. It goes back to the San Diego sports curse. But
no, it goes back to the small window.
Okay, the small window. Okay, well, it's, they're all connected. But LT's had a nice career on TV. You see him on television every once in a while,
Yeah, but I think I'll say something here that's going to bother people because I love him. What a great athlete. Really nice person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. He's a sellout. He sold out San Diego to go tell everybody how great the Chargers are in Los Angeles.
I remember that.
With no reference and no memory of he wore the lightning bolt back here. I'm sorry. That's a sellout. That really bothers me. I don't want to hear you talking on TV about the LA Chargers. That's our team, our colors. The owner stole our franchise to move it to LA. That being said, I hope Justin Herbert goes 17-0. I hope Dean Spanos goes 0-17. And you can direct me to your psychiatrist so I can lay on the couch and we can kind of work through this problem. But I'll guarantee you, everybody on live stream, I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people, commenting on social media, like, why are you still covering the Chargers? We've turned the page on them, but there's still a lot of people that love them, even in San Diego. And I mean, honestly, I gave up on the NFL when the Chargers moved out of town. But since we've been doing this podcast together, I've been following the NFL, and I find myself kind of rooting for the Chargers again. So I don't know. Is this sacrilege? I have no idea.
Well, I'll have the appointment at 1 p.m. with the psychiatrist. You can lie on his couch at 2. Okay. Hey, listen, we hope you've enjoyed our bonus coverage. NFL draft continuing through the great sports weekend. We're going to be back on Monday with bonus coverage. Another podcast will recap the NFL, talk about some of the other topics on the table. John, as always, enjoy talking, exchanging gunfire with you. Sometimes don't agree with me, but you're the one that's going from left field. Have yourself a great sports weekend.
Okay, there's still time to get home and time for round 2.
On we go. Here comes the rest of the NFL draft. Thanks for joining us on Hacksaw's Headlines. Please tell all your friends, share all the information we have, subscribe to. We'll see you come Monday. Have yourself a great sports weekend. Thanks for being with us on Hacksaw's Headlines.
Join us again for Hacksaw's Headlines on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And find the audio version on your favorite podcast apps. For more content, go to LeeHacksawHamilton.com.